Hello, my friends. So welcome to another episode on Consulting Interview Prep with me, Nilay Bhatnagar. In this episode, we'll take another example in the mergers and acquisition series and see the other flavor of mergers and acquisition cases where you're required to maximize value creation post merger. Okay, so that will be the emphasis of this particular exercise or this particular case. And if you remember in the previous video, we actually saw a more typical mergers and acquisitions case where you were required to evaluate whether your client should go ahead with the merger or not. In this video, we'll take a look at how our client can maximize value creation post-merger. Before we dive in, a couple of quick callouts. The way you should run this is I'll read out the prompt, then we'll cover a few clarifying questions. Then you should pause this video, take some time, and then join me back as I discuss the solution to the case. All right. With that said, let's dive right into this interesting case called CompressCorp from McKinsey. So your client is the CEO of Andover Compressor. It's an established player in the natural gas compression industry. They're known for their high quality compressors. Think of these compressors as machines that are essential for extracting and transporting natural gas. Anderson Compressor has built a robust business model around manufacturing, installing, and maintaining these systems, catering primarily to domestic markets or in the US. Anderson Corporation is set to merge with another company called Bellspan. Bellspan is a competitor of comparable size to our client Anderson Corporation. Bellspan also excels in the production and service of natural gas compressors, but they have a stronger footprint in international markets and have made a significant investment in research and development for energy efficient technologies. The merged entity will be known as CompressCorp. Now, investment bankers, being investment bankers, have projected substantial value creation from this merger, citing synergies in manufacturing capabilities, expanded geographic reach, and combined technological expertise. So the CEO of Anderson Corporation wants us to verify the synergy potential and requires advice on integrating the two companies to maximize the merger benefits. So how would you approach this case? So let's just quickly cover a few clarifying questions that would be interesting in this. The first thing is just clarify the scope, right? So sounds like they've already made the decision about going ahead with this merger, and we are not actually required to evaluate whether or not they should acquire Bellspan. Is that correct? Right. So I would just double check my understanding of the scope or the focus of this particular case. Then I'll go on to ask about any specific success factors or success criteria that they have for this merger, right? And finally, and probably this is something that you guys should definitely ask in a merger specific case, is get a little more information about the two entities that are being merged if it's not very clearly given to you, right? So for example, we know the two companies, they both produce natural gas compressors, right? But sounds like there might be some differences in their product portfolio. So I would love to understand how are our products different from the products of Bellspan, right? They provide energy and efficient solutions. How is that different and how do the customers react to that? Secondly, I would want to understand who are our customer bases, right? And is there any overlap between our customers and Bellspan customers? Sounds like they operate in very different geographies. So this might be limited, but still should be good to double check, especially in the US, right? Because that will definitely limit the potential of synergies between the two companies if they have a large overlap in their customer bases, right? You can ask about their market shares, like how are they positioned in the current market, how much market share do they have, etc. Right? And again, you can check how do they sell to end customers, just to see how they're doing distribution, right? So this, like overall, like just clarifying a little bit about the business model of the two companies will allow you to actually think more creatively about the synergies, right? So what I would suggest as a rule of thumb, whenever in the prompt they are talking very specifically about the synergy or isolating the synergy potential, right, or thinking about value creation between the two companies, I would highly encourage you to check upon the business models of the two company as a clarifying question. That will definitely help you in tailoring and being very specific about what synergy opportunities you should talk about. All right. So now, as I said, that wraps us our clarifying questions. So please take some time, maybe time yourself, give yourself about 2 minutes, see what you can come up with, and then join me back as we discuss the solution to this case. All right. So hopefully you were able to use those 2 minutes pretty wisely. And now we're going to talk about how should we approach this. So the first thing, I have no bucket here that talks about the attractiveness of Bellspan as a company. I'm not interested. I don't want to know how fast have they been growing, etc. Right? Because that's not the scope of the question. I'm not required to evaluate whether they should acquire Bellspan. They've already made that decision. Right? So my focus is very specifically on the synergy potential. Right? So this is where I'm directly answering the question. I'm not using a memorized framework. What I'm doing is I'm just selecting the pieces from my overall M&A approach. The first part of which used to be, if you remember, the attractiveness of the market in which the target operates. The second bucket used to be the economics of the deal, right? And in that, there was the standalone attractiveness of the target. I'm not talking about those two buckets at all. I'm directly zooming in into the synergy potential, right, from that framework. So depending on the case, the specific objective of the case, you have to modify your structure. You can't just use the same thing. Okay? All right. So now the way I would deliver this is, okay, in order to evaluate how we can maximize the synergies and how we can capture that, I'll look into 3 areas. Number 1, I would just like to talk in detail about the synergy potential between the two companies. Number 2, I would want to look at what would be the key capabilities that would be necessary for synergy realization. And number 3, I'll quickly talk about some risks. So diving into the first bucket, here I want to talk about revenue synergies, cost synergies, and then strategic synergies and some other kinds of synergies. Right? On the revenue side, the first synergy I want to talk about is increased pricing power. Right? Maybe the combined entity, because now they have a bigger market presence, right? That will allow them to combine or command a higher price for their products and services because they're just limiting the options the customers have. Right? Number 2, they have expanded market reach because they have very complementary markets. Right? Bellspan is more prominent in international markets, whereas our client Anderson is more prominent in the domestic market. Right? So we can start selling our products in the international markets, and then we can start selling some of Bellspan's products in the domestic market, right? Specifically in geographies where we are not currently there. Maybe they can help us kind of bridge those gaps, right? Number 3, we'll have a more comprehensive product offering and service offering for our clients, right? As we know that Bellspan has heavily invested in R&D and they've been focusing on these energy efficient solutions. So now if we combine that with our products and services, then we have a more comprehensive and more attractive offering for our customers, right? This might help us increase our revenues because we might be able to charge more for these services. This might help us attract new customers because now we have more attractive value propositions for them. So this might actually increase our revenues. Now, I'm not talking a lot about cross-selling over here because both companies have very similar products, right? So cross-selling potential as such won't be possible, but what can be possible is like what I just talked about, a more comprehensive compressor solution offering. Right? All right, moving on to cost synergies. Right, over here, I definitely think there's a lot of cost synergy potential between the two, especially like, you can consolidate some back offices, especially that are not, and especially for those kind of functions for which location is not very critical. Because we know they operate in different geographies. So maybe to some degree we can consolidate IT, HR, legal, accounting, finance, etc. Right? We can definitely take a look at the sales and marketing organizations in like domestic geographies and also internationally, right? We should definitely consolidate our sales and marketing efforts domestically and internationally, although I do think we'll have to keep them separate because sales and marketing would be directly responsible interacting with customers, and so probably we cannot merge international with domestic markets, but we can definitely consolidate within region. Right. The second big synergy potential could be more purchasing power with suppliers, right? Because they might have more power with negotiating with suppliers. Right? This might give them better rates on procurement, etc. And finally, there might be some strategic synergies as well, right? Now, this might result in a stronger market positioning for the client. It might develop a new, stronger brand presence if the execution goes well, right? And this would help them increase their goodwill, their brand value, some intangible benefits that come with a stronger brand presence and a stronger market position. Right? And they will also be able to protect themselves better against competition, against new entrants, etc. Right? Those could be points of strategic synergies. So that wraps up our first bucket about thinking about the synergy potential between the two companies. Now let's move on to the second bucket, where we'll cover what capabilities would be absolutely critical for this value capture. Right? So I won't create a long list, right? But the few things that are absolutely critical in these kind of mergers. Number one is we need to have a very, very clear merger value creation plan, right? There should be a detailed list of initiatives, the value, the price pool attached, right? Or essentially the business case attached, the initiative leaders, a progress scorecard, right? That gets monitored effectively, right? The right kind of operating structure with reporting, giving visibility to the leadership, etc. So you need to have that kind of a setup that ensures that there is a clear plan and then there is execution support and oversight on the delivery of these initiatives. This is very, very important. Number two, you have to definitely handle change management and communication, right? Both internally and externally. Now, your customers might be confused when the two entities merge, right? And so you have to proactively communicate and inform them about the changes that are coming their way. How can they expect that business as usual will not be disturbed by this merger, right? How can they reach us in case they have any questions, queries, doubts, right? Or any issues, any problems with their products or services. And finally, we also have to talk about talent retention and organizational design. How will this new entity look, right? How will we ensure that we're retaining the best talent from both organizations, especially in the fields of R&D engineers, right? Or like really good salespeople. You don't want them to go away, right? So you have to ensure that there's no ambiguity, there's no confusion when the two companies meet. Everyone is clear about where the combined entity is heading, what was the rationale behind the merger, how this fit in this bigger entity, what is their role, right? What will be the new organizational design, what will be their reporting lines, their roles and responsibilities. All of those things have to be clear as soon as possible, right? So those three things would be super critical for ensuring your merger is a success. And finally, just wrapping up things with a few risks. So market-related risk could be anything that changes in the compressor market, a new technology, a new competitor that completely disrupts it might disrupt our clients as well, right? There could be antitrust laws now because Bellspan and Andover, if they merge and if they capture a certain market share, the rules or the government policies prevent monopolies from existing. So they might push back or they might not allow this merger to go through, right? And definitely we want to talk about there might be some customer concentration risks with Bellspan or Anderson, right? And if that is the case, where you have like a lot of revenue attached to a single customer, then you definitely want to see how you can mitigate that, because if that one customer goes away, you're pretty much screwed, right? All right, so that wraps up the discussion and the structure on this interesting case. I hope you found this useful, right? Please leave some comments. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any questions, would love to answer them if I can. As the next step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another series on private equity next, because I think it's similar, but there are certain differences that need to be talked about separately. So I'll see you in that episode or in that series on private equity cases. Till then, take care and goodbye.